All right, why don't we go ahead and get started? Welcome and thank you for joining us for Oklahoma NG9-1-1 GIS, Vision, Partnerships, and Training. My name is Sandy Dyer. I'm from the DataMark team, and I'll be moderating today's session. Before we begin, I'd like to let everyone know that we are recording this webinar, and all attendees have been muted for quality assurance purposes and for video viewing availability at a later time. If you have a question, please use the Q&A or chat section of this platform, and we will answer them for you at the end of the presentation. I'd like to introduce our presenters for today's session. Please join me in welcoming Lance Terry. Lance Terry is the Oklahoma State 911 Coordinator, and Shelley Willoughby. Ms. Willoughby is a GIS Specialist with the Oklahoma Office of Geographic Information. Mr. Terry, Ms. Willoughby, can you share a little bit about yourself, please?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Sandy. Thanks everybody for joining. Good morning, or if you're unfortunate and you're on the East Coast, then good afternoon. Welcome to our presentation. We'll show our PowerPoint here in just a minute, but just a little bit about me. Again, my name is Lance Terry. I've been in the business, in 911 business, not GIS business necessarily, for about 33 years. Started out as a dispatcher in a small town and worked my way up through 3 different agencies before taking the state 911 coordinator position. A little bit about my GIS experience. I was thinking about this last night, and we bought a computer-aided dispatch system back in 1994 in Midwest City, Oklahoma. And when we bought that, it was kind of the first in the area to have GPS in the police cars and the fire units, using the little green screen mobile data terminals in the vehicles and things. But in dispatch, we had probably about a 50-inch CRT monitor that took 6 ginormous men to pick up and put on the roller cart thing. And it was always one of those things, if that thing falls off, it's going to kill you. But at that point, that was when I really first got introduced to GIS, and actually, being able to see in the background of the computer-aided dispatch system some of those items that are in there and how it would be presented on the screen. Even though we couldn't do a lot of changes in the Trimble system, we were able to add street segments and things like that in our CAD system in order to validate the GIS records. And then moving over to another agency, I was introduced to Map Info, which was wonderful because now we get to draw roads and things. And then we graduated up into another CAD system, computer dispatch system, that allowed us to use Esri, and by that time it was way over my head and had to call the professionals in, and luckily we did, because we were able to bring in some very smart people at the city of Norman there, and be able to make that happen. So that's a little bit about me. I could tell you a whole lot more, but we'll just keep it like that for now. And I'll let Shelley introduce herself.
Hello, everyone. I'm Shelley Willoughby. I work for the Oklahoma Office of Geographic Information. I have been there for 20 plus years, strictly doing GIS work. I'm kind of on the opposite side as Lance. I just focus mainly on GIS, whereas I was introduced to the 911 world when we started this process. I've been heavily involved with the GIS coordination with the state of Oklahoma. And so I've worked through those, but to be able to bring the GIS and the 911 world together has been a great adventure for us, because it's really taught me a lot about how 911 uses GIS and how the data sets that we've built for many years will help to supplement what 911 is doing. So let's do this.
All right. So when we're thinking about our title to our class, Sandy, can you see that okay?
Yes, sir. Okay.
So, we're thinking about our class, and Sandy approached us because we've been doing some work with DataMark, and she said, hey, we like what you have going on in Oklahoma. Could you present at our conference? And of course, I don't ever say no to an opportunity to speak and talk about 911 and talk about Oklahoma, and because I'm pretty passionate about it, if anybody knows me. And so we took the opportunity, and we were thinking about titles, and we were thinking about, well, Sandy made me do it would be a good title or something like that. But we landed on this Vision, Partnerships, and Training. because really at the end of it, that's what we're really trying to accomplish is a true vision and how Oklahoma approaches GIS in the public safety world. And so when we're presenting on this, I want you to think bigger than just 911 or NG9-1-1, because that's how we're thinking in Oklahoma. So we've already went through our introductions. So on the vision aspect, and we'll go through these in the slides. So, you know, what were we trying to accomplish? What did other people do? What have other states done? What have we seen in Oklahoma? And how can we approach this and not waste our time or work in a silo and be, you know, well, it's just 911. How can we make sure that we have a product at the end of the day that can really be used multi-purpose? And that's a solid product. So with that, we looked at our partnerships, and anytime that you do a project like this, you know, the old way of thinking was, well, we got to hire people. We need to hire a GIS person. You know, we need to hire a team of people to go do this. But in state government and in most municipal governments, there's a lot of people around that can do that. Shelley and I were talking about right before this class that when I was at Midwest City, she says, oh, you know, you were over there and you had this GIS product. Did you work with
Kathy Spivey?
Kathy Spivey. And I was like, that name didn't even sound familiar to me. And so, you know, again, working in silos and not engaging those people that do this for a living every day. So we knew we had to embrace our partnerships in the state of Oklahoma with locals, with companies like Datamark and other companies that we have on state contract now. And then at the end of it, one lesson learned that I learned in the radio world. When I was at the city of Norman, I was over the radio shop and I was over the 911 dispatchers and 911 system. And the one thing I learned was, you know, you can buy all the gadgets and widgets and gadgets in the world, but if you don't provide the proper training and continuing education, it will fail when you need it. So I didn't want to fall into that trap. I really wanted to start this off with training and not start it off with widgets and gadgets. So if we were going to open up a grant program, I didn't want to just start throwing out software licenses and all this stuff without going, okay, before we give you this, you need to understand where we're at and what we're doing. So that's kind of where this process has been with Oklahoma. So going on to vision, you know, when we were looking at this, it's like, where do we start? You know, and I can remember going to some classes when I first started the job at the state, being the state coordinator, and thinking about NG9-1-1, looking at our state statute that really didn't have a lot of NG9-1-1 in it, didn't talk about GIS really at all, and thinking about where do we go with this? How do we start this process of next generation 911? Well, everybody I talked to in NASA, the National Association of State 911 Administrators, with NENA, the National Emergency Number Association, when I talked to the folks that are in there, they're like, well, you better get your GIS stuff in order because it took us 3 or 4 years to do that. And I'm like, oh, noted. So we come back and I start looking at what does this mean in Oklahoma. So one thing is good for Oklahoma is it's good to be last. You know, contrary to Will Ferrell here in the picture, you know, if you're not first, you're last. Well, that's true, but for us in Oklahoma, we were able to learn lessons from other states that was very beneficial to Oklahoma. I remember when I first started, the first year I was on, I went down to Texas, and they were talking about their GIS and how they put together GIS for the rural areas of Texas and how they've got all this prep work done, and they have this repository and all that. And I'm like, we have nothing in Oklahoma. So learning from that was very important. One of the key things is when you look at can we do it? You know, can we do it? I mean, am I going to have to hire a GIS person? I work under emergency management. That's where my position is housed. And, you know, we've got a couple of people that can spell GIS in emergency management. And, you know, Zach is awesome and he's good and he puts together awesome maps and he does wonderful things. But he also has a full-time job that's it's not GIS. And so, where do we need to go? And can we do this successfully? Do we need to hire a contractor? Do we not? So, again, I talked about the statutes and what statutes support us, what statutes did not support us for NG9-1-1 and for GIS. How do we attain the buy-in from the locals? This was huge. This was really before I ever talked to Shelley Willoughby and her team and talking to GIS professionals. It's like, how do we get this buy-in from the locals? What benefit does GIS work have for your local fire chief, police chief, sheriff, EMS director? What benefit does this provide them? Because at the end of the day, that's who's overseeing the majority of our 911 centers in Oklahoma. So if I can't get their buy-in and be able to attract them to GIS, then I'm going to have a very difficult time getting them to apply for a grant, come up with 20% match, and all these other things that go along with it. So, again, we talk about partnerships here in a few minutes, but really the partnerships goes back to those locals. We got to have local buy-in. The locals can crater everything that we're doing in the state capitol with a stroke of the pen of the governor. And we can't have that. We've got to make sure that we're educating across the board. It all goes back to training. It all goes back to education. So what exists today? And Shelley will talk about the 911 standard that existed. I had no idea that this 911 addressing standard even was out there, but it was there. And so we looked at that. Regional NG9-1 GIS efforts. There were some strong regional GIS efforts going on. Now they were working in a silo, and they were doing their own interpretation of the NENA standard and working on their own interpretation, but very rarely were they really talking to each other. So we had a strong silo or area in the Oklahoma City metro area. We had a strong silo in western Oklahoma, in the rural parts of Oklahoma, and we had a strong one in the Tulsa metro area. But really, at the end of the day, they really weren't talking and communicating across the board. So we knew we had to do something about that. So, the one thing, and if you're on this call and you don't know this, you've got to have strong, solid GIS in order to route calls in NG9-1 environment. So we know that. We know we have to have that strong GIS data. The strongest GIS data that you can get is at the local level. If you think that after it gets to the tax commission or whoever that's doing that in those worlds, and you think you're going to get accurate GIS data, I think you're going to be mistaken. If you feel like that I work for the Department of Transportation, so I know everything, and I'm going to put this thing together. Well, you're mistaken, because the locals are the ones that approve streets, that approve plats, and put that stuff in at the local level. If you're not driven at the local level with your GIS data, then you're going to have problems when it comes to a state repository. So we needed a single state repository. We didn't want these silos to have their own repository, and then we have these edge issues. We're already going to have edge issues with our neighboring states. We know that. We know that EMS boundaries on that state line just make a big zigzag across the board, and they wave. Volunteer fire departments jump across that line all the time. So we know we're going to have issues like that. So internally within the state, we didn't want to have multiple repositories of GIS data. So that was a driving factor that went towards this vision and overall goal. We learned from others. We are a home state rule, or a home rule state. We really want to, and again, I came from the local level, and I want to tell you, one of my favorite sayings when I go in now, it's like, hey, I'm with the state and I'm here to help. I'm here to help. And everybody laughs when they take their wallets out and they throw them on the table or whatever it may be, and they're like, just take my money and go. I mean, that's what you're going to do anyway. But coming from the local environment, I like local control. I don't like the state telling me what to do, because I've got a mission at the local level that's different than other people's missions in other parts of the state. The rural parts of the state are totally different than the metro. A university town is totally different than a non-university town. So we knew we had to embrace this home rule state issue. So we, in talking with Kansas at different conferences that I went to and things like that, which I'm a big person on conferences just like this one. How do you learn from others? Very important. So eat the chat up. And so when I was learning from Kansas on what they did, I liked what they had going on because they did have a single state repository. They did gather people together. They did have issues and problems that I wanted to know about. So we took, what, 8 of us? There was 8 of us that got in different vehicles, and we drove up and we stayed the night in Kansas, and we sat down and we met with them. And we had a solid conversation with how did you develop this and what did you do and what were your lessons learned? And we really based our model off of this Kansas model. So it's not that we're doing anything, that somebody else hasn't already done. I hope we do it better than Kansas because, Kansas is Kansas. It's, the Jayhawks, and we don't, we're Boomer Sooner and, shoot them guns and all that stuff. So anyway, we wanted a GIS tool that included more than just 911 needs. And I think this is where we go back to buy in at the local level. We wanted to make sure that this GIS tool had meaning to the locals, not just the 911 dispatchers, but how is this going to affect the overall response in the public safety environment. So we wanted a multi-use GIS data set for public safety. If anyone is following the $15 billion infrastructure bill for NG9-1-1, and if you've seen any of those things, so this infrastructure bill, the $2 trillion infrastructure bill that's currently being floated around in DC, includes $15 billion, billion with a B, for NG9-1-1. In there's a definition, and that definition of NG9-1-1 is not just 911, what's your emergency, and I see where you're at. It's not just your address. It includes the ability to send multimedia from any device that has the potential of calling 911. So we're talking about traffic cameras, refrigerators, Bluetooth devices. It doesn't matter what it is that can call 911 and take that information that it's giving you, pictures, video, or whatever, bring that into 911, bring that into a system that the dispatchers can either artificial intelligence or something like that to determine if it needs to go to the field, and then send it to the field, to the actual mobile unit in the field. That's the definition that's tied to this $15 billion. So in Oklahoma today, our CAD systems, 911 has one map. Our CAD system may have a different map because it may be on 2 different platforms or whatever it may be, or it may have different needs, like impediment layers. It needs speed limits and bridge weights and all of that for fire trucks to go over them. So it may need all that stuff, but 911, we're not going to focus on that. We're going to let you guys take care of that over here. Well, that's horrible for mutual aid. It's horrible for multiple different factors. So we also knew that the mobile computer software in Oklahoma, the majority of our mobile software out there uses public maps. And what's that, Shelley? Bingo. No, I can't say that. I can't say the name of the company that one of our companies used, but bingo, you've got it. Bingo. Yes. And so, but what happens is 911 call comes in certain areas, especially in the rural areas. 911 knows where the call's at. They put it in the system. As soon as they put it in their computer-aided dispatch system, this vendor scrapes out and sends it to the mobile client. Well, then mobile verifies it against this public data set, and it's wrong. And literally, they have gotten in their trucks and they've driven to the opposite side of the county on high priority calls. That's a problem. So if you're looking at GIS data for 911, you need to open your mind up for what this definition is for this infrastructure bill to make sure that you're covering everything across there. So what we included in our standard was that impediment layer. We want speed limits. We want bridge impediments. We at least want the option for you to put that in. It also helps our state police. It helps our state fire marshal's office. EMSs, when they come in, if they've got this state repository of data, now they have the tools that they need in order to use within their mobile platforms and their CAD systems and things like that. So, so what other state projects were successful? So in Oklahoma, one state project that I use in public safety is the NCIC link, or the OLED, it's Oklahoma Law Enforcement Telecommunication. And I'm telling you, it's a computer program software that's been very successful over the years. And I think one of the main reasons it was successful is because training. You know, they have a week-long training class, they do continuing education, they're constantly putting things out to update things. So it always went back to this training aspect. So all these state projects that were successful go back to training. The more training you have, the more successful that your project's going to be. What other state projects were not successful and why? Well, I lean back on the radio project, and nothing against our radio people. You know, they're great, but their hands were tied. Their millions of dollars rolled into the state of Oklahoma with little to no notice after 9/11, and they had to spend it or lose it. So it's not their own fault, but when you back up and look at it, training was not part of that. So we have system overloads in the radio world and all these different things because people don't know how to operate these little computers that they push to talk, release to listen. So again, back to training. Lack of training, not successful. The more training, successful. Training. And in this quote here, no goal, regardless of how small, can be achieved without adequate training. And I firmly believe that. You've got to be able to train on what you're trying to accomplish. So, that's where you take over? Yeah.
No,
that's still me. You'll get to hear Shirley in a minute. So, some of the products we wanted to produce out of this was training. Obviously, I've said that multiple times. And we knew that we didn't have the internal abilities to probably provide this training and put this on. And we also knew that if it's coming from the state, it may not be taken very well at the local level because there's a little bit of friction between locals and the state. And I think that goes with any state, to be honest with you. So we really thought, you know, we need to bring an outside person in this. And at the same time, we were receiving a grant from the federal government. We got about $3 million. And so we put this in our grant project and it was approved. So now we have additional funding to help us fund this training that we needed to have. So we knew we needed to put an RFP out, and which we did. Branding, you know, not to say anything about vendors, but sometimes vendors will do stuff and they'll put stuff out and they're like, oh yeah, this is Oklahoma standard. This is going to be based on the Oklahoma deal. And this is great training. You need to come to it. And that's fine. That's great. Anytime you can get training, I'm a firm believer in it. However, we want to make sure that whatever we did, everybody saw something and they said, oh, that's coming from the state of Oklahoma. That's something I need to be looking for. So we came up with this logo. It's nothing great. It's nothing big, but it gets our point across. It has our Oklahoma 911 Management Authority logo in the little upside down teardrop. What do you call it? Pointer. In the pointer. and then GIS Training Group, and it tells us kind of a little bit what we're trying to accomplish. So again, I would recommend that. Anytime you could brand yourself, people are directed to the right place to go. The GIS toolkit. This is something we learned from Kansas. We knew we needed a toolkit the locals could use if they wanted to do their own GIS data upgrade or improvement of their data. We needed a toolkit, the same toolkit we're going to use at the state level to validate their data. They needed to have at the local level. So we knew we needed that. And we knew we needed this single statewide data repository. So these are some of the things that we had in our vision or our you know, to the left side of our whiteboard. So this is what we've got to have going and what we have to have done. So that kicks us over with partnerships. I'll turn it over to Shelley to talk more about that.
So one of the things, like Lance has said, with our partnerships is what did the state handle? How did we already handle GIS? Well, Oklahoma is very fortunate in that we had a very strong GIS partnership with our State GIS Council that was actually started in 1994. We are one of the states that have legislation to create our council. So we were very fortunate to have this group of people to be able to work together. So who was the authority of the GIS data? Well, again, because of our GI Council, we had worked for a number of years with these 19 state and local agencies to be able to develop GIS data, to be able to know where that data, who to go to for that data. And it's a very strong community to work together. We had worked together with training because, as Lance said, not only for the 911 community, but for GIS as well, training is a huge important piece of it. I can't tell you how many times I've heard of people that have had a software box dropped on their desk that says, okay, go learn GIS. Okay, well, I don't know how to load the software. I don't know anything about it. As Lance said, one of the biggest failures to any program is not to be able to train your people. GIS is not something that's easily learned without training to be able to know what button to push. Once you have that training, you have the software and all those pieces together, then it's not as hard as people make it out to be. But you've got to have the training to know how to do it. Well, the GI Council had the ability and the people to be able to do that, and we've done it in the past, but we just needed to make sure that we had the strong partnerships to do it. So the work that had already been done, our Department of Transportation, several of the other Council of Governments, they had already laid the groundwork for the GIS data that we would need. We had worked together through the GIS community to be able to do some of these things, but we'd never incorporated the 911 world into it. And bringing those two groups together was a huge piece of this that we needed to be able to do. So being able to make the connection between Lance and myself and to bring those two worlds together was a huge piece of this puzzle. And to get everyone talking, to get those communications going, to get that so we know who to talk to in each world to be able to make this partnership work. So as Lance had mentioned with the 911 addressing standard, the council actually started our first standard in 2011. We had put together a work group, and at that point, it was just an address standard. We knew that we need to have a standard to be able to put addresses into a GIS format for people to be able to follow. So even before the 911 world, before we were really introduced into it, we had an address standard. Then once Lance came to us, we began working together. In 2018, we put together another address standard that included more of the 911. And then in 2020, we actually went through the process of updating that standard to include more of the next gen 911 information that we needed for this grant and to move everyone into that. So the way we do that is it is written with a partnership between the GIS and the 911 community. It is approved by the GIS community at the GI Council, and then it is then approved by the 911 Management Authority. So it's a stamp of approval from both of groups so that everyone knows that, yes, this is a statewide coordinated effort so that both groups know that we have been able to look at it, had their input, and work together as a partnership.
Sheila, I want to add one thing, real quick thing. On the 911 perspective, when she talked about throwing a box of software on the table and say, hey, you need to learn this. That happens to our 911 supervisors. The night shift supervisor, who has the more time on their hands, supposedly, gets this box and says, hey, we need to figure out GIS. So you need to go figure this stuff out, go make it happen. And so that literally happens. And so if you make the assumption that the people that are doing the 911 GIS work today are true GIS people, that's probably mistaken. Now, they're doing the best that they can do, but when you're looking at an NG9-1-1 world, it's no longer just the dispatcher seeing it. It's truly, and it's really just the dispatcher seeing it. It's really not using it in the background to route calls or anything. So just don't make that mistake and make an assumption that everybody's on the same level. And you'll see that in a minute with our training that we provided. So, sorry.
No, and that's a great point, because a lot of people, they have this software and they can open it, but they need that extra help to figure out what they need to do. Or when you ask them for a data set, yeah, they might kind of understand what you're asking for, but how do you get it out? How do they do what they need to? The training is the key component so that they feel more comfortable with being able to use the software or to provide what you need. So when we're talking about more about the partnerships, the council, we have legislation in place that helps us. So when a lot of people ask you, well, how do we know we were able to do the standard, or what gave us the authority to do the standard? Well, in 2004, we actually have legislation that provided the teeth that we needed to create the standard for GIS data as a whole, and created the Office of Geographic Information that will allow us to maintain and update those geographic information standards to be able to put those in place. So Oklahoma is very, very fortunate that even back in 2004, we were given the legislative authority to be able to do this. So we can create those standards with the Next Gen 911. And I know a lot of states don't have that authority in place to be able to do that. So this is one of those key pieces that made Oklahoma very lucky that we can do this and help the 911 community.
So one thing that I want to look at was what would our team look like? What would this team look like for GIS? Does it, it can't just be me and Shelly. And so when we looked at this, we knew we needed state, we needed local, we need rural, we need metro, we need both 911 and GIS professionals. We need a full mix of people to be on this. And so what we did is we kind of blended two of our committees. The people that have been working on the addressing standard for several years from the GI Council side, along with our technical committee who made a GIS subcommittee out of that, of the GIS professionals on the 911 side. We merged them together and it became one committee to come up with a plan and how are we going to apply for this grant and what's our vision and how do we develop these partnerships. So that's kind of how it started, was making sure that we had all aspects covered and we weren't leaving anybody out. So at the end of this, we had the Oklahoma 911 Management Authority, which is me, which I'm the weak link in this whole thing. I'm just telling you right now, 100% the weak link. I've got a wonderful person that works for me, Stacy Root, that organizes meetings and does that kind of stuff. So that's what I get. That's what I offer. The Office of Geographical Information, which is Shelly's office, and then Oklahoma Department of Transportation, excellent resource for us. They've got a lot of GIS people that work within that. City of Ardmore, Charles Brady. I think I saw you on the call earlier. I'm telling you, we wouldn't be where we're at today without Charles Brady. That's just as simple as that.
If you ever have any questions about the standard in Oklahoma, talk to Charles.
Yeah.
He wrote it. He can repeat it in his sleep. So if anytime you have any questions, talk to him.
I think the great thing about Charles is Charles, very knowledgeable person and is driven to put stuff on paper and make it happen. The great thing about Charles is Charles is open to criticism and open to change, which is wonderful. And that's what makes this successful. Then an equal person, Mary Harris at the Southwestern Oklahoma Development Authority, the SWOTA. Mary Harris is our chair of our technical committee on the 911 Management Authority side. A wealth of information, both GIS and 911 technology. And then we have the Oklahoma Association of Central Oklahoma Governments, who basically takes care of the greater Oklahoma City metro area. And then we have the Indian Nations, who takes care of the greater Tulsa area. So that's how our team pretty much ended up with. We brought a person in from a CAD vendor, or from CAD side, Russell Anderson from down at Norman. And so we had a few other people that joined us, but really this is our core group that worked on this. So this mixture of state groups was very important. And being able to combine these committees that really never really talk to each other except on a local level, we're able to come together and get strength with the 911 Management Authority. And the 911 Management Authority, we actually have some power to be able to withhold funds from the locals. And so we have the stick that we can help carry. They have the policy that says that they're the holder of this GIS data, but we have the stick that says you're going to have to join us. And then this approval process. The one thing that we did was, the GI Council is the one that ultimately has the say-so on any GIS standard in the state of Oklahoma. But they didn't want to approve it unless the 911 Management Authority approves it. So our process is anytime there's a change and there's a new standard or new update, we're on version 3 now?
2.1.
2.1. And so we send that to our committee vets it all out. We send it to the GI Council. The GI Council approves it pending approval from the 911 Management Authority. We then send it to our 911 Management Authority, who then makes the approval. Then it's done and it's posted out on the GI Council website. So that's our process for approving the standard.
So with the training, as as Lance and I have talked about, truly the training was the big piece. That was our next thing. So with our state and federal grant opportunity, we wrote in this piece to be able to write the training, to get that out to the locals, not only from the GIS side of things, what will be helping with the 911, but the 911, just to bring those people together. Let's train them all on the same page so that everyone has the same message. They know what is going to be expected of them, what the standard is all about, and try to introduce, because as Lance said, with working for the city of Midwest City, he may not know who their GIS person was, or the GIS person may not know who their 911 next gen 911 person is. Let's bring these people together. Let's get them talking so that they can use each other's resources and help each other out. With COVID and not being able to meet together as much as we had hoped, that has been a little bit more of a challenge than we'd originally planned. But we've made it work, and we're working through that. So we had 3 courses that were identified. The standard concept, which just really is the point of letting everyone know about the standard and what is expected. The application, which is more of a hands-on GIS course, and then our sustainability, which will teach people about the state repository. So through the training, the first step, of course, is to release the RFP. We got that written, we got that out. We did the bid process. Again, with COVID, that threw us back about 6 to 8 months. Never, ever try to do this during a COVID pandemic. It was quite the challenge to be able to get everything together, but we did it. Getting everything in place for the training did take a little longer than we had anticipated, but we've been able to do it. And we contracted with Datamark. They hit the ground running and got us up to speed, got us moving in the right direction. As I said, virtual versus in person. Originally, when we wrote the RFP, everything was going to be in person. We felt very strongly that having these 2 groups of people together in person to start those communications was key to the success. Fortunately, that just wasn't allowed right now. So we had to decide how do we make the best of the virtual versus in person. And then the locations to hold classes. When we do get back to it, how were we going to do this? Originally, we had determined there would be 5 locations across the state so that we could actually hold those classes, so that we could take this kind of a traveling roadshow across the state, get people together. Again, that wasn't necessarily allowed right now, but the idea was to get as many people in the room together, get those communications, get people talking, so that we could put the GIS 911 people together to make this a successful program. So course 1, we invited 911 coordinators, supervisors, GIS coordinators, their professionals, county assessors. In Oklahoma, a lot of times that 911 GIS is held at a county assessor level. As I said, a box shows up on somebody's desk. We actually have one of our 911 county assessors that's exactly what happened. She'll tell you the way she was introduced to GIS was that Esri box that was sitting on her desk one morning. And then she had to go and figure out how to get trained on this. And so she is doing 911 in one of our counties now. And so we have heard this story over and over and over again that training is key. So the training for the GIS standard concept really was just to introduce them to the standard. We wanted to put everybody on the same page. So they covered 911 concepts, they covered GIS concepts, and then they went over the standard. What's mandatory? What's conditional? What's operational? What does this mean? Because both from a 911 and a GIS perspective, when you start talking about mandatory, conditional, operational, they have no idea. And we didn't either. I couldn't have told you what a mandatory, conditional, operational component of a standard was until we started in this and training everybody and getting them to have that conversation. So this one was very important to start that communication.
Yeah, and so one of the things I wanted to accomplish for this class was, can you do it? So we went out on a state contract and we got 6 vendors on state contract that can provide this service to the locals. But really it was, the thing behind this was these 911 supervisors that are also the coordinators that are also the GIS experts. Can you do it, or do you need to go out and get a vendor to do this for you, at least to get you up to the standard so you can maintain it? And then we had about $2 million available, and we still do, for locals to be able to get grant funding to do that work. So it was very important to us to say, hey, it's not a time to challenge yourself. If you can't do it, let's not do it. We got money. Let's go make it happen. So
yeah, and that was one of the key pieces to this as well, is just teaching people about the GIS aspect, the 911 aspect, so that they can determine, can I do this? Is this something I can do in a time frame that we need? So we trained over 125 individuals. We did record it. The one great thing about having it through Zoom is that we were able to record it. So it is available online. So if anybody wants to go out and see it, here's a link to the online class. You can sit and watch it. And so it might be very helpful for others as well to see kind of what we were able to do. Here's the map of the training coverage. The green areas are the places that we trained. So we had a great coverage from the state, and it got people thinking, you know, okay, what is this? And Lance said that it's also let people know who they weren't reaching out to. They were able to look at some of these counties and go, why didn't you take this class? Now you can go back to the online course and take that class. And if you have questions, it has all of our contact information in there so that you can then go back and talk to us.
Oh, and I shamed all of them.
And yes,
I sent it out and shamed them. I shamed every one of them that didn't go. So
Lance is very good at shaming us,
yeah.
All of us. So he was able to use that map to shame people. So course 2, we have 10 scheduled. It'll be an 8-hour class. We are going to try some in person and then some virtual. So the first 2 classes will be in Oklahoma City. The second 2 classes will be in Tulsa. And what we will do is we will make these virtual available as we need to, hopefully with the in-person classes. That will be, because these will be completely computer lab-based courses. And so we are going to train them on just GIS concepts, how to use that toolkit. ODOT put together a wonderful 911 Next Gen toolkit based on the Kansas model. And so the B2 class really will be a deep dive into what the best practices of GIS will be and how to do this 911 toolkit. With the first class, we didn't really have a prerequisite. For this class, we are requesting at least a year of GIS knowledge and how to use ArcMap. So this will get more into that hands-on training to be able to teach them how to use the tools necessary to update that standard. And then course 3, which we hope to start in June, will be 6 courses, 4 hours. Again, we are looking at the in-person versus virtual. And this one will be, how do you take that data that you've maintained and upload it into our state repository? So this will be the final step to this 3-step process, is once you got your data, once you have it where you think will meet standards, where do I send it? How do I send it? What do I do with it now? Well, that's where you send it up to the state. And based on the meeting that we had with Kansas looking at their repository, we've built the Oklahoma repository, and that will house the data, make it available for people. So this training, again, will be how to deal with the next gen 911 validation tools, deciphering how those error reports that you're going to get. Because as a GIS professional, there's nothing more frustrating than running a toolkit, and then you get an error message and you have absolutely no idea what it means. I mean, where do you go to find help? How do you contact it? You know, you beat your head against the keyboard going, now what? Well, hopefully with this training class, we will be able to have those error reports, give them some information about how to get past that, how to get your data to where it can be uploaded, and who to contact, again, if you have process, because networking is the key to any of this in GIS and in 911.
And know your neighbors.
And know your neighbors. Who do you contact? You know, if a lot of people will be doing this late at night, well, how do I get past this? What do I do? Well, this is that class that will help you be able to do that.
So, you know, what are our next steps? One of the things is how do we maintain or sustain this at the state level? You know, the updates come in for the standard, but, you know, Shelley's team is unfunded. They only get paid when they do work for other state agencies. And so we have to fund that. And so making sure that the 911 Management Authority understands that this is very important to not only 911, but public safety in general. And we need to step up to the plate and make sure that we fund the long-term update and continuation of the state standard. Continue education. We've got to continue to provide education. These error reports that are coming out are going to frustrate people. So we've got to send out and do education and do webinars and do outreach in order to make sure they don't get frustrated. Because I'm going to tell you right now, you frustrate a 911 dispatcher and they will innovate around you and you'll never hear from them again. Because I know, because I've been there. I'm that guy. Data collection and total buy-in. Total buy-in, total buy-in, total buy-in. I can't stress that enough. If you work in a silo and you don't have somebody out there that's driving, I mean, today I'm driving to Adair County, which is right on the Arkansas line, to go out and meet with people to get buy-in on what we're trying to accomplish in the state of Oklahoma. You got to pound the pavement. You got to get out there, because if you don't have buy-in, rumor mill will kill you. So you got to put stuff out. We use social media. We use email blasts. We're very proactive when it comes to that. If you follow hashtag now, where's the 911 guy, you'll see where I'm traveling to all the time around the state. So, follow me, hashtag where's the 911 guy. So with that, we'll entertain any questions that we have. We've got a few minutes. Good job, Shelley. We've got a few minutes to entertain any questions that they may have. I think Sandy's going to be our moderator on those. So this is our contact information. Feel free to reach out to us. I'm an open book. That's my downfall. That's the reason why I almost didn't get hired to this job, because I tell people the way it is. So if you have questions, holler at us and we'll be happy to help.
Absolutely. GIS questions, anything like that. The key is the networking. If you're starting down this road and you have questions about the training, how we did it, it's all on our website. The standards on our website. We're certainly happy to help. We'll let you know. We are completely indebted to Kansas because they opened their books to us, they gave us their toolkit, said, here, make it your own. We're happy to do that as well, because the more we can network and help each other, the stronger we're all going to be.
All right, Sandy, back to you.
Well, see how complete you are? There are no questions.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome.
I know.
Well,
no, that's not weird. You guys are very detailed, and I think people appreciate the candidness and the amount of information that you provide, right?
Well, I wish we'd had a teleprompter that actually translated Okie talk to English. I'm sorry that we didn't have that.
And I know you were busy during the webinar, but I want to let you know that I did share out the link to your state GIS training, because folks were asking about it, because obviously through Zoom, the link's not available. We can, if you're open to it, absolutely make the PowerPoint available.
Yeah, absolutely. You got it.
So I do have a question from Craig Logan. How much Mountain Dew did Lance consume today?
I'm working on sorry, when I started out, I said I'm very passionate about it, and I am very passionate about it. I can talk with the best of them, so I appreciate that. That's good feedback.
The thing is if you know Lance, this is pretty normal. So you just have to hang on and go with it. So for the just coordinated side of me, who's very organized, very coordinated, and from the seat of his pants flyer over here, Lance, we bring out the best in both of us. So he has coordinated people that keep him going. He helps to drag me along and gets me out of my box. So it's just very good and very strong partnership. But yeah, Lance is normally like this.
Well, and there was another comment saying you guys are great and that they need this in their state badly. So, and of course, Julia says, great job, proud to be an Okie. Just so everybody knows, I need to go ahead and let you guys know about the next session, but Lance was kind enough to email me and say, is this today? I double booked. I'm on my way to Tulsa. I'm going to try to make it back. And scared me to death. So they're super awesome people to work with for sure. And Craig says, see you at NASNA.
Awesome. See you there, Craig. Appreciate it.
All right. Okay, folks. So thank you again. And the reason that I truly appreciate you guys sharing your information is that, many are unsure about how to move forward, and hearing how others are tackling it is very valuable to them. And we do really appreciate that you took the time out of your busy schedule today, because I am sure that you really did have a conflict and were heading to Tulsa at some point and went, oh no, Sandy made me do this, and had to turn around. If you were not able to, I think we hit all the questions, but if you find that you have questions afterwards, please feel free to reach out to the presenters directly. They did share their information in the PowerPoint, but if you weren't able to capture that, please let me know, and I'll get that information to you. Our next session, Top Issues Seen in NG9-1 Data Remediation, which is actually going to couple this one very well, is starting actually in about 8 minutes. So if you want to jump onto that session, I think you're going to find it valuable. It's going to discuss some top issues experienced in remediating data for NG9-1 readiness. Thank you, everyone, for attending today. We truly appreciate it, and I hope you found it funny and informative. Have a good one.